Okay, hello and welcome back. Guess what today's video is going to be about? Daredevil, the man without fear. And yeah, first off, I just want to say that is an awesome Funko Pop of his original yellow suit. I really, really like that suit, and we'll be looking at that. Before we get started, just wanted to do kind of an update on my current situation. I don't think I've talked about it on videos before, but I know a handful of you, I've told a little bit about what's going on in my life. It's actually kind of a weird situation I've been in before. So on January 11th, the people I work for came to me and said, you're on suspension. We're not going to tell you why. HR will contact you and they'll run an investigation. We'll let you know what happens. And they sent me home. So after several weeks of not hearing back from them, wrote a letter to corporate office, discovered yesterday that the letter itself, it was a certified letter that I sent to HR. Couldn't be delivered because of like lockdown stuff. It's, you know how lockdown gets to everyone. So yeah, couldn't be delivered. It's come back to me. So I finally managed to contact somebody on the phone. Talked to them about the situation, what's going on, and they checked their paperwork, and apparently when they suspended me, they actually terminated me, but they didn't bother to tell me for more than a month. So yeah, so basically, yeah, just basically requested that the time when I thought I was suspended and not actually, I just asked that the company compensate me for my time for that and any sort of paid time off I might have or sick leave or whatever. And so after talking with her and putting in that request, I talked to a lawyer I know, and she said, well, a couple things. One, that if I wanted to pay her to draft a letter to my bosses, it would cost more money than I could expect to get back. So not worth it, really. But also said that my demands were, are reasonable to make, that I could tell them that I talked to a lawyer, and she had said that my demands were reasonable. So we'll see what happens. Maybe nothing will come of it. Maybe something will come of it. Either way. Yeah, so decided to do Daredevil because lawyer. And, if you're in the Marvel Universe and you need a lawyer, go to Matt Murdock. That's pretty straight up. You honestly should do that. So wanted to kind of explore a little bit about Daredevil, his powers, abilities, all that stuff. So Daredevil first appeared in 1966, more than 50 years old. How about that? And everybody, I think, knows his main thing, which is he is blind. How he got his powers is pretty consistent across all the different mediums. An older guy was crossing the street. He was hard of hearing and couldn't hear a truck coming. Matt Murdock, as a young kid, I think like 11 or 12. I don't know if they ever established his actual age. Managed to push him out of the way, got clipped by the truck. Wasn't seriously injured by that, had some injuries, but wasn't seriously injured by that. But the truck was hauling some toxic chemical spilled, got into his eyes, blinded him, but also gave him superhuman senses. His abilities, I think the only one that most people know about is kind of his radar sense, where he can just perceive all the objects around him, actually more accurately than a person who had vision could see. One of his lesser known abilities is his sense of touch. He could, if you write on something on a piece of paper, he could run his fingers along it and tell exactly what was written. It's so sensitive that even printed material he could read faster than a speed reader could read the printed page. It's a very good talent. I think that helped him become a lawyer and, to do all that stuff. Yep, that about covers his origins, the big reveals on that. I think Daredevil actually predates a lot of other blind heroes. I know in the 80s, blind ninjas were a big thing in the 80s. Seems like, you got a lot of blind ninjas in the 80s. There was, of course, Rutger Hauer's great movie Blind Fury, and then there's been a handful of others with blind, hero in them. But I think Daredevil was the first one to do it, so yay him. So as you can probably perceive from my Funko Pop here, yes, I am a big fan of old school Daredevil. So we're gonna kind of show you what he was standing up on. Take a look at this. This is the original collection, his original, compare it, original suit. Yep, pretty accurate for the most part. One thing they did in the comics, the artwork that I really liked. Let's see if I can flip open to a page where it shows it. So you can kind of see it right here. You can see. I liked how they did the grading where it looks black, but light shines on it, has kind of a red tint to it. Gave it a really cool little grading to it. Of course, yes, the yellow was his original suit, which lasted for approximately 6 issues before it was replaced with the traditional red suit. Let me pull that one, that's the second one. Mike Murdock Must Die, that's the, kind of the red suit and how we came to know him. I've heard that Jack Kirby claimed credit for the redesign of the suit. I know he did a lot of the printed pages and stuff like that, so it's entirely possible, but it's also, Jack Kirby seems to take a lot of credit, kind of like Stan Lee, so it's hard to tell who exactly did what and who's more responsible for something or else. I highly recommend... So, okay, I'm going to move on to kind of the stories and how the stories worked. I'm going to say something very, very controversial here about Daredevil, so, brace yourself, don't immediately condemn me, those of you who are familiar with Daredevil. But I think the worst thing that ever happened to any Daredevil story was that, my brain just went dead. Frank Miller wrote for Daredevil, I think was the worst thing that happened to Daredevil as a storyline. So before you condemn me, let me make this abundantly clear. Frank Miller's writing was superb. It was really, really, really good. He reinvented the character as a very dark, sort of brooding thing, included a lot of Catholic imagery and Catholic guilt into the character, and just kind of made just very dark, sort of not always happy storyline endings, which really worked for him. If I was going to criticize anything that Frank Miller did, it isn't anything that was actually in the comics, but kind of the premise that led him to write it the way he did, which has to do with Catholic guilt. So he had the belief that since Daredevil is a superhero and a lawyer, he must be absolutely 100% full of Catholic guilt, so he made Daredevil Catholic and included the Catholic guilt. I'm not Catholic, so I can't speak to how accurate that is, but it always felt like it was a bit of a stretch to me, but it worked out fine. He created some really good comics, so give him credit for doing that. The problem with Frank Miller, the way he wrote, the way he brought things out, was that pretty much, not every, but most Daredevil stories after Frank Miller were exactly the same. They would have, Catholic imagery, beautiful Catholic imagery, Catholic guilt, and, depressing things happening to all the main characters. And it felt like every time I'd pick up a Daredevil story, I would just find that in every single Daredevil story, they started to feel the same. And I think there were some genuinely good stories after Frank Miller, but because everyone was trying to copy Frank Miller and how Frank Miller wrote, they all feel the same, and as a result, I stopped reading a lot of them. So, I was expressing this a little while, about a year or so ago. I was expressing this to somebody online, and they said, have you ever read any of Mark Waid's Daredevil? So I said, no. No explanation, just say, well, maybe you should check out Mark Waid's Daredevil. So I picked it up. This is, let's see if we can get a good look at it. You have to move everything now. Okay, so this is the Waid Daredevil thing. I like that cover. That's a very cool looking cover. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but yeah, everything is like little words which represent the sounds that Daredevil hears as he moves. It's a really cool cover. But one thing that Waid did was that he kind of brought back how Daredevil was before Frank Miller. So more of a swashbuckler, adventurer type guy, and it's really refreshing to read. I didn't like every little thing he did with the character and where he went with the story, but it was kind of a relief to read that sort of Daredevil story after, you know, all the dark, heavy stuff from after the 80s. So it was almost like going back to the 60s and having a redo on it. So if there was one thing I was going to criticize about Mark Waid's, he brought back Stiltman. Now, yeah, I'm not going to bother trying to find Stiltman in this. You can look him up. So one thing that Stan Lee did really well, Stan Lee wrote a lot of the original Daredevil storylines and a bunch of other comics, of course, was that he was able to take these really absurd concepts that, you know, if you hear about them, you'd say, that's utterly ridiculous, and then put it into a story and have it work in the storyline. And Stiltman, I think, was very much, was very much along this same sort of line. He is an utterly absurd character. He's a guy on stilts. Well, not precisely. He has this metal suit, which is technologically was compared to Iron Man's suit, which allowed him to essentially grow stilts out of the bottom of the suits, but they would compact into, so he'd look like a normal sized man, but would be able to grow fast, so fast that the eye couldn't follow it. It was very, very fast, like Quicksilver fast. Is a very fast up and down that he would do on it, and makes it very hard to hit him when he employs that. But also, it made for very subtle. So he'd be this massive, you know, figure walking, then all of a sudden he'd be gone. All I'd have to do is, you know, collapse the stilts, put on, you know, take off the mask, put on a, you know, overcoat, and he could blend in with the crowd. In fact, Daredevil, when Daredevil first faced him, he did that. He just vanished in front of Daredevil, and he's like, wait, where did he go? And this is a guy with better than normal human senses. So, yeah, so one thing, Mark Waid brought back Stiltman, but had him be kind of the stereotype that modern comic book readers have of Stiltman, that he's completely unsubtle, that he was just a completely over-the-top, unsubtle villain, and he essentially had him in a flashback scene where Stiltman was this big distraction from this other, what somebody else was doing, and it was like, yay, Stiltman, but oh man, why would they have to do why did they bring him back just to have him be the butt of a joke? It's a massive disappointment. I felt the same way when I was watching the new Doctor Who, and they brought back the Macra only to have the Macra have been devolved into just plain monsters instead of the really smart creatures they originally were. So, you know, it's just one of those things like, yay, he's back, but why did he have to come back like that? Anyway, going back just to the comics, Stan Lee's original, read it, very good. Mark Waid's, Sideways, well worth the read. A bit darker than the 1960s, but 1960s got really dark, and people people who haven't read the 1960s don't realize how dark and heavy a lot of the stories got. But let's move into other medium with Daredevil. So first off, Daredevil has appeared numerous times in movies and so on. So this is his first appearance, Trial of the Incredible Hulk. This is a 2-disc set that we have here. Let me pull it out. So the first one is, of course, Thor's appearance. That's what he looked like back in the 80s. But this is how he looked, which I think is very similar to the suit that they used in, well, I'll get into what they used it in again in a second. It's based on kind of the Year One, which was written by Frank Miller, which was kind of a just black suit with no real features on it, as opposed to kind of the red suit that later became. So if I tilt, angles are kind of weird, so let me move the camera a little bit. So that's John Rhys Davis as Kingpin. I thought he played an interesting version of Kingpin. So it's well worth watching and checking out. One of the things that the two movies did, Incredible Hulk Returns and Trial of the Incredible Hulk, they were made for TV movies. What they were, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that they were designed to be essentially trailers for other Marvel characters. In this case, Thor and Daredevil were meant to have their own TV series. And it's kind of a bit of a disappointment that they never went anywhere, because at least when I was a kid, Trial of the Incredible Hulk came out on TV. I missed it, but the next day, pretty much every kid I knew in school was talking about how awesome Daredevil was. So it kind of a missed opportunity, but yeah, very, very good. I think that was the first live action they did of Daredevil. Of course, there was the Daredevil Ben Affleck movie, which gets a lot of grief, but I have to say a couple things that visually, I think they did a really good job with it. One. Two, Ben Affleck's suit is probably the best live action suit they've done. It just looks the best. And three, Vin Rames played Kingpin in that one, and he was surprisingly good. I thought he made for an interesting Kingpin. It was an interesting take on the character. But of course, we have to get into the newer stuff, and that we get, of course, to this Daredevil, first season on Netflix. So Netflix Marvel Works was pretty good for the most part. One of the problems I have with a lot of TV shows that are based on other things is that when compared to movies, is that movies pretty much they have to cut out everything that isn't 100% important to the plot to fit the movie into like a 90 minute to 2.5 hour long movie. You cut out a lot. With TV series, suddenly you've got like 50-minute episodes with 12 or 13 episodes per season. There's a lot of space to fill it in there, so you're going to get a lot of excess stuff. And one of the things that most of the Netflix Marvel TV series had is a lot of filler. Daredevil season 1 is the exception. If you're only going to watch one season of the Netflix shows, Daredevil is the one to watch. It's superb. Vincent D'Onofrio plays Kingpin, and he does a really good job as Kingpin. Oh, and hold on. We are having a cameo appearance by Van. Yay. Okay. He's probably wondering what I'm doing. But, yeah. Anyway, back to this. Daredevil, it's well worth watching. It's a darker version of Daredevil, so it's more based on Frank Miller, but they pretty much do everything right with it. It's a good story, well worth watching. One thing that I feel like that it's not just Daredevil. This character appears in several of the Netflix ones, but Stick, I think they got Stick. The actor who played him, Scott, I can't remember his name. But he's a really good actor who played him. So give credit where credit's due. The actor did a great job. It's just the character's written as a complete jerk, and it doesn't really match with how I imagined Stick to be in the comics. So that's probably a personal problem. But other than that, first season of Daredevil, well worth watching. The other series and other seasons you may or may not like. Take it as your own risk. They do have a lot of filler in them, whereas the first season of Daredevil didn't have all that much filler. It pretty much stuck to the story and did a really good job. So highly recommended. Those are kind of the visuals with Daredevil that you should check out. So these collections here of Daredevil run about $30 to $40. This second collection here, I'll just pull that out for you. I showed it to you a minute ago. Mike Murdock Must Die. This is actually, most of the Epic collections are about 15 comics. This is 22 comics in this collection. It runs about $40 if you can find it. It's well worth collecting. One of the things about a lot of these collections is they'll get printed, and then, depending on popularity, they may or may not have a second printing. And as such, could go up in price or go down in price. It just depends. So I don't know if this is applicable where you're at, but before COVID, interlibrary loan was really good for me to find a bunch of these old series and watch them or read them, I should say, and be able to do that. I could also get, things like Daredevil. If you didn't have Netflix, you could probably get this on interlibrary loan. It's become a bit more dodgy with COVID concerns and problems and stuff going on. So, use it at your own risk. Well, no real risk, but you can attempt to if your library doesn't have it, you can attempt an interlibrary loan, which may or may not work because they may or may not be able to get some of this stuff. Yep, so that's my recommendations. The Mark Waid, I picked this up a long time ago at used, so it was only like $5 for 2 movies. That was really good. This was about $20 for the Daredevil Blu-ray, but it's also I actually don't know. I don't know if it's still on Netflix or not with the license and stuff. I haven't been on Netflix in ages. This Daredevil was about $15 for 5 comics each for the Mark Waid. So, these old ones are a much better deal, and quite frankly, they're better comics, even though Mark Waid did a good job. I think that about covers everything I want to say about Daredevil. Check him out. He's a pretty fun character. Let me know what you think. Let me know which version you prefer. And yeah, if you really want to support me now that I'm unemployed and trying to figure all that out, just like and subscribe. And that's about all. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of my cat's cameo, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.